Hi guys, this is the next video for making your mini sculpture. You're now at the stage where you're trying to take the basic shapes that you've made, a disc, a sphere, a cylinder, and a vertical disc, and you're going to actually make them into something that an object that you are inspired by. So the first thing you need to do before you're watching this video is look online, and let's say your inspiration was one of the palm trees in the dinosaur garden. You're going to look up images of that palm tree. You're going to save images. You're going to look up images of ceramic sculpture, totem sculpture. You're going to think about what you could do with your sculpture and save at least 10 or 20 images that are going to also be your inspiration. So once you've done that and you've looked at enough images, you're then ready to alter the basic shapes into what they're going to become when you choose your big sculpture. So this video is going to show you just a couple of ideas. All right. Now, one thing that you can do with your any of the shapes, and you're going to want to make sure all your shapes come off the straw so that you have all of your basic shapes separately. So you've got your disc, you've got your base, you've got your cylinder, and you've got your and you've got your sphere. Okay. Now, one thing that you can always do with these is to create impressions. All right, so your base might even end up being part of the big totem pole that goes down like this. So you can create impressions on any of these shapes, but I'm going to show you how to create an impression on your base. All right, if it was a plant that inspired you, you could actually take the plant itself and press it into the clay, and it makes an interesting texture. All right. You can alter your disc, your base disc in any way. You might want to cut it with your needle so that it's more wavy like a petal. Okay, so I'll just do that with my disc. I'll just kind of make my base into a disc that is inspired by this pretty yellow flower that I got from the garden. All right. So I'm going to make the kind of, and then again, this is sort of an abstract version of the flower. It doesn't have to look exactly like the flower, but I've just sort of cut some petals, okay? And, you know, as I look at it, this also has like a little center with the petals, but I think for this one, I'm just going to use impressions. So I'm just going to make this a little bit more organic looking by just creating the impressions, creating some texture on the disc, all right? And making sure that I have my hole. So one strategy is to create impressions, okay? So I also altered the shape by using the needle, but I just created impressions, or, you know, you don't have to use the flower. You can draw things in there. All right, you can make this just be a really interesting organic shape that is going to go on the pole, okay? All right, so another thing that you can do, so that's into creating impressions. Another thing that you can do is actually carve into the, I'm going to do that here actually with my cylinder. You can carve into the cylinder or into the sphere or into any of them for that matter. Now, if you are going to do this, I recommend you wait a little bit, let the clay get a little bit harder because it's a lot easier to carve when it's hard. But I'm just going to show you some examples here. So maybe I was inspired by, I don't know, let's see. I was inspired by one of these plants, and I want to carve in some different shapes into the plant. All right, so all I need to do, because this is hollow, I can take my needle and I can carve in with my needle, or I can press in different shapes. And this, all right, because it has a hollow center, you're going to be able to see through the shape. So you can see the pole you're going to be able, if you end up making this one for your big sculpture, you'll be able to see the pole through it, but it could have all these interesting shapes. Now, again, if you want to carve into it, because it can look really cool, and on Monday I'll show you some examples of that, You want to let your clay get a little bit harder than this clay is right now because it's a lot easier to carve into once it's at a leather hard state. But that's your second strategy. You can add impressions, or you can actually carve into the clay where it actually becomes hollow. I would recommend, if you're going to carve in, either using your sphere or your cylinder, because they're the ones that are the most hollow. All right, so we've got add impressions, we've got carve into. The next thing is alter the shape. So some people were in the prehistoric garden really interested in making dinosaur sculptures. So you could take your sphere and you can alter the shape. So you can try to make this into a dinosaur head, let's say. So you're just going to take your hands, you're going to kind of look at some pictures of some dinosaurs. So if this is your inspiration, this is something you would have saved on your Pinterest board or on the Google Images, and maybe printed it out if you need to. But once you're in the stage of altering the shape, you're just going to use your board, you're going to use your hands, all right, and you're going to create the shape that you need to create. Once the shape itself is created, let's say you want to add a horn, it's the same thing you do. Adding anything is score and slip. Okay, so I'm just going to do this quick. Yours would probably look a lot better than this, but I also have some dinosaur sculptures and stuff you can look at. But let's say you just score and slip. You're going to make a horn there. Okay, the only thing you need to be aware of is that this hole always has to go through it, okay? So make sure you're keeping that. But like, yeah, then you can draw the eyes on, okay, whatever it is that you were inspired by. If you were inspired by the long neck one, all right, you could do the same thing. You could score and slip a long neck onto this. But if you're going to do something that's going to stick out really far, it's got to be thick clay, not thin little pieces. Okay, so the third thing you could do is alter the shape completely, as long as it remains hollow. All right, the last thing I want to show you how to do is kind of what we did with the relief tiles. Let's say it's the Art Deco part of the building that you were inspired by. You might want to carve into something. So let's say it's one of the you looked at the building and you wanted to carve into the tiles the geometric shapes, okay? What I would do is I would carve into this piece of clay, draw your design out, and just like you did for the relief tiles, you could take one of these carving tools and you could kind of carve away pieces of it, and you could even add in pieces of it. So that if this is something, the geometric shape is what you want to make, you've carved away, you've drawn it out, and then you've carved away pieces, and you might even add texture, you might even put things on there. You want to do this on both sides if you're using the disc, okay? But you could make this, you could alter this disc shape. If you don't have to carve into, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that just because I carved into the cylinder, or just because I added texture to the horizontal disc, or I altered this shape, you don't have to. You can alter the shape of the cylinder, or you could alter the shape of this, or you could add texture to this. These 4 strategies can be used on any of the shapes. So once you have your images, you're going to save all your images, then you're going to kind of think about, what do I want to do with each shape? And you're going to make these are sort of like your prototypes, things that you might make for the original sculpture. So that when you're done, now yours is going to look a lot better than mine because I'm just trying to do mine fast so that you can get an example of what something would look like. So here I have a textured disc, a cut into cylinder, a dinosaur head, and the beginnings of an Art Deco tile. So once you have your example, like your idea of what you want to do, draw it on the piece of paper of what your shapes are going to become. Look at images, and then check in with me, because I might ask you to like say, okay, well, if you're going to carve into your disc, we need to let that dry for a day so that it'll be leather hard so you can carve into it, okay? Or I might give you a dinosaur head to look at, or I'm just have some suggestions for what you could do. All right, so fill out your sheet and get started on the next step.